I'll be the first to admit that when I'm a certain kind of mad, I can be a certain kind of mean. My greatest shames truly come from the intensity with which I would like to act upon my anger, how I actually act out my anger sometimes, and the meanness that can come with it. I don't think that this means I'm a mean girl at my core, but I think my lower self, my self that my less evolved self, my child self, uses being mean while being angry as another way to cut myself off from relationships. And it's also just another example of needing to work more on my communication skills around like having these tough emotions and experiencing those tough emotions. If you used the words compassion and kindness and anger in the same sentence like a few years back, I would have thought that I heard you wrong. The two don't seem compatible. So we're gonna explore that in here. But I realized that anger is a normal emotion. And I've had a lot of anger problems in the past, but it's a normal emotion. It's going to come up no matter how much healing you've done around things. And we just have to learn how to express it as best we can, living in the values that we have and we want to live by. And so learning to live in your values means actually living in your values on a daily basis, because the stuff you do every single day is what makes up your life. Also, values-based living is one principle from acceptance and commitment therapy, also called ACT, ACT, and so feel free to look that up also. So in order to do this and to incorporate my values, using my values as an approach to express my anger in a kinder way, I came up with two different lens shifts. One lens is having to do with connection and community, and the other lens has to do with compassion and kindness. The first lens I came up with because I was realizing that anger for me is a very, very one-sided emotion, and it always has been, because it cuts me entirely off from the other people, from the world, and it puts me in this little silo and this like path with my blinders on that I need to express this and like nothing else matters. And I just need to act out the energies I have in me at that time, and who cares about anything else, and the consequences also don't matter. That's just not the case. Anger is always in the context of relationships with yourself and others, and there are things at stake for poorly and meanly communicating your emotions. So I found this bell hooks quote, and she writes about the fracture that takes place like amid anger within relationships. And this is from her book, The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love. And it says, anger prevents love and isolates the one who is angry. It is an attempt, often successful, to push away what is most longed for, companionship and understanding. It is a denial of the humanness of others as well as a denial of your own humanness. Anger is the agony of believing that you are not capable of being understood and that you are not worthy of being understood. It is a wall that separates you from others as effectively as if it were concrete, thick, and very high. There is no way through it, under it, or over it. So that was basically me. And like hearing this quote, I was like, yeah, this is a fantastic way of looking at it in terms of anger is believing you're not capable of being understood. You're being misunderstood in some way. How can we resolve that understanding and lean into like the companionship side of anger, which always exists in relationships? Just a keynote that I have is that, especially with emotion like anger, we have to view it in context and realize that there are connotations around anger and the expression of it that exist. It's both for you and it's for the other person. And sometimes anger is associated with violence and abuse. So that's where I want to be very careful when it comes to what our anger response looks like, basically. So for you, are you acting out your anger? Is your natural response a product of something from your past? Because that can be something to look at. Like, this is the way that I saw anger expressed in the past. This is how I know that one expresses it. The second is more around other people. You don't know what the person listening or on the receiving end of your anger or witnessing your anger has experienced in their past. Being cognizant that seeing someone angry and what not even knowing what they're angry about, or just like seeing them, can be triggering in itself to people. Anger is a healthy emotion, and anger is so normal. But what's not normal and what's not as healthy is some of the ways that we might act it out or see others acting it out. And so I found that a method that does not work, no matter how many times I've tried, because I said, okay, I have to stop acting out my anger because I have a problem. And I did. I had intermittent explosive disorder. I will link a couple videos in the description if you want to learn more about that. Basically, an impulse control disorder. And it's like anger comes on so fast you don't see it coming and you express it unhealthily. So I said, okay, let's do the opposite. Let's like not act it out at all. Let's just keep it inside. Like just pretend to be as cool as a cucumber as possible. But the thing with that is like you can smother a small fire that's going on with like a blanket and you can cut it off from its oxygen. But I don't believe that the anger that you're feeling or that's inside of you can ever be entirely cut off from the oxygen. It's like a psychic oxygen that's still going to exist in remnants within you no matter what. So if you think you've covered it up, or you think you've smothered it and you've put out the fire, I don't think that that's possible. I think the embers are still going to be there, period. In other words, pretending the anger isn't there and that we're unbothered is not a long-term strategy. And so we view it in terms of centering relationship and then also getting into the second lens shift, which is leaning into the value of compassion and kindness. So sort of approaching anger from the lens of compassion or kindness, or putting on the compassion kindness filter. It's not always possible to begin the putting on the filter or putting on that lens as soon as you start experiencing anger. That is why our best friend when it comes to managing anger is time and space and distraction. And the more time and the more space you can have, the better, to an extent. The compassion filter is used most effectively when you've calmed down and that adrenaline isn't racing through you and you're no longer heightened. But sometimes there's an inciting event that calls for you to respond in the moment, and you have next to no time or space to be able to step away and like try out the filter. And so you have to live up to that challenge. You have to live up to that challenge as best as you can. And that's one of the hardest things to do for me, is to keep things regulated within myself when I do feel this anger coming on. And I just want to say you are capable of doing this too. You're already watching this video, so that tells me you're taking this seriously and you're trying to learn tools and tips and think about your anger in different ways that allow you to express it more healthy and overall live a better life and have better relationships and a better relationship with yourself. So I have a few considerations for when, there's almost no time frame of being able to step away, and then I have some for when you are able to step away. What are some things you can ask yourself? So the first is when you have to respond in the moment and you might not have time to go to be in your wise mind. Get in your wise mind. Your wise mind is a combination of rational thinking and emotional intuition. Put together, that's wise mind, and that's where we want to make most decisions that we make in our lives. And this is a concept that comes from dialectical behavioral therapy. If you'd like to look that up, you might need to put on pretend wise mind for just a second. So the first thing I recommend is starting your response by acknowledging your emotions and outlining your intention. So usually your intention would look something like, I'm saying this to be honest. I'm saying this to be heard. I'm feeling X. So this step will provide orientation and like a framing around the upcoming conversation for you and the other person or people. And it hopefully can help keep you on track and center yourself around this, and also force you to actually express the emotion in a word or words instead of relying on body language, which is like what I think is like the key indicator of anger. It's like the go-to, I think, for a lot of people, is like it's visible. So this is trying to turn that into a word or words as best you can. My second tip is when you are bringing up a certain emotion, You should consider being careful about the words that you're using, because coming into someone's office and saying, I am raging mad right now, or this is so fucking upsetting to me, or I'm seeing red, like any of those things they're a lot to hear for the other person. And as soon as they hear those, they're gonna go into defensive and protective mode. They're gonna try to protect themselves from whatever's coming. And they're gonna get closed off, and they're not gonna be as receptive, I don't think. And so I would consider using words like frustrating or overwhelmed. I'm feeling frustrated right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Words like that are just a bit softer and might be more manageable for the other person to receive and work with. I'm not trying to have you water down your emotion, is not the intent there. But that's kind of like, it's like the self-preservation angle of, if you do come in and you're entirely truthful and all your emotions are showing through, there could be consequences that come from that we don't want. And so these are some ways around it for now, or at least to put like a band-aid on this for now when you have to respond right in the moment. A thing you can do is create or start memorizing like different phrases or like sentence starters to use in times of an anger crisis that feel usable to you, that sound like they're in your voice. And these don't have to be so formal or even more than a few words, but I think what can be really helpful is visualizing, or actually practicing saying these things so it does sound like it's like from your voice. I have chosen some phrases that, these are just the ones that came to me and that I will use sometimes, and they have this like humor or silliness element to them. Yours don't have to be that. Yours can be, serious. They can be all different lenses, but I want to do a caveat for humor and silliness when it comes to serious topics, like expressing emotions in the workplace. And one is, me using silliness and humor is not meant to invalidate my feelings of anger in the moment, but it's to band-aid the moment and to keep me from saying things that I'm going to regret later that are going to get me in trouble. I also can decide to employ this certain thing in the moment and then return back to this in a more serious way later. I would also like to express marginalized communities in the workplace, so like women, people of color, etc. Unfortunately, have to be careful employing something like humor and silliness, and this might work for some of you and it might not work for others of you and not align, because if we respond jokingly to something that's, angering us, the other person or people might think that wasn't triggering, or that was okay to say, or that you're just fine, when that's not the case. So it depends on the moment for me. Sometimes I'm prioritizing like, this is really a thing that was like not okay that I'm angry about, that people should know in the moment, like it's a group setting and people should learn not to do this. This has happened multiple times, like whatever. That's just, I'm balancing it. But other times it's like, okay, I think I'm about to do something I'm going to regret. There's going to be a big consequence here. So I'm going to use the humor, even if they think that like I'm fine and what they said was fine. So it's totally dependent, and it's very unfortunate and hard to do this. With that being said, sometimes I'll say things like, this is frustrating me right now. Haha. It's sort of a silly speaking voice with a playfulness. That's my alternative to like, okay, this is so fucking upsetting. That's my alternative. You see the difference? Now, could there be a middle ground? Yeah, I encourage you to find that as well. Another thing, wait, why am I being so emotional about this right now? That's so funny. Can you just give me 1 second to reset? I don't know what this is. Maybe you do know what it is, but that's what you're saying, to go get you some space. Maybe you just say something like, yikes. I wouldn't have said that. Yikes. Maybe you say arg, in a very pronounced and exaggerated way that it's almost like a joke, but like also not. Next in the moment is to heed emotional mirroring, which is a natural tendency for one person to mimic another person's body language, or like nonverbal communication, which could also be tone. If you're coming in hot to a conversation, you can almost expect unless this person is like a therapist or something and they're a trained professional to have this like keen emotional understanding within themselves and like a really high emotional IQ, things like that, you can pretty much expect them to go into defensive, protective mode for themselves. And for some people, that might look like, you know, getting quiet and shriveling up. But for other people, that could look like they're about to be mad now. Literally just because you've walked in the room in a certain way, because they can feel and see what you've just brought into the room. Make sure you heed emotional mirroring and you use it not to your disadvantage, but perhaps even to your advantage. When there are situations where you're able to take time and space, like that's ideal, because the anger and the problems with the way we act out our anger come from doing it immediately and not being able to think things through. So as much space as you can get is the best. Also, within an extent, you can't be taking a year and then returning to that thing like it's past, within reason. One thing you can do is ask yourself, based on the bell hooks quote that we talked about, which says, reminder, anger is the agony of believing you are not capable of being understood and you're not worthy of being understood. You can ask yourself, how am I being misunderstood here? This can help you get to the bottom of what the actual anger might be about. Another thing is asking if this anger, right, and you've stepped away, this has been a minute, asking if this anger is worth your continued attention, because sometimes it will be, and it is important to return to this and address this either with other people or just reconcile it within ourselves. Other times it's like a day later, an hour later, and you're like, oh my God, I literally don't care about that at all. And like, that's true. And so you're like, okay, well, that's that. And then I want to remind you, if you do decide to re-engage with the person later, just remember that clear is kind. I encourage you to try out the compassion kindness filter as well as the community connection filter and some of these other language and conversation tools. I think you can begin to view your approach, or just try it. Get curious about viewing your approach to expressing anger differently and in a more healthy way, and like what that could look like. It could be legitimately life-changing. And I also want to say this is really hard to do, and it's especially hard to do when this has been the way that you've been expressing or viewing anger for your entire life so far, or for many, many years, because the neural pathways in your brain are literally have grooves in them that are sending like your thoughts and your body chemicals and things down the exact same route every single time, because that's how you've trained it to do so. This makes it very challenging to try to have them go a different way. And you're just used to this other way, and your body knows like, oh, this is what happens when we see this, or then it goes in this, and then I do this. It's really hard work to do, but it can be life-changing. It can change your life. And know that you can do this. I can do this. And it's not always going to be perfect, but we can do this. We can challenge ourselves to do this, and we can overcome that challenge. We just have to guide our anger through the right channels and in the right ways that make sense for the values we're looking to live through. Thank you so much for watching today. I will see you in my next video. Again, I'll link more anger related videos down below. Bye.